One time I was walking home from the train station after I spent the weekend at my aunt's house. It was about 11 p.m. at night and very dark outside. When I was almost home, I noticed a guy on crutches in front of me, who walked the same direction and then stopped every couple meters to turn around, then to look at me before continuing to walk on. Since he was walking with a limp, I quickly passed him. When I did, he stopped walking and grinned at me in a very creepy way. I just kept moving. Since I lived in an apartment over a burger restaurant, for a moment I considered to ask one of the employees to walk with me to the front door, because to get to the entrance of the apartment part of the house, you had to walk around the house in a dark court. Finally, however, I didn't ask because I thought what could possibly happen? This guy is on crutches, and I didn't want to come across childish. So I was walking through the court of our house and I wanted to pull out my keys while walking, but suddenly I couldn't find them in my handbag. I realized I had thrown them somewhere in my travel bag because I didn't want to lose them from my handbag while staying at my aunt's and being out with her all the time. So still standing in the middle of the court, I had to search the whole bag for the damn key. I was so distracted by the whole key searching incident that I totally forgot about the creepy guy I had encountered before. When I finally pulled the key out of the bag, I looked up and the guy from before was standing right in front of me grinning. I always thought in a situation like this that I'd start screaming, but instead, I couldn't get myself to make any sound at all. With the keys in my hand, I started running to the front door. I opened it and jumped inside the house. The guy, still walking with a limp, followed me as fast as he could. Luckily, due to his injury, he wasn't as fast as me. Now, fortunately for me, our front door was one of those doors that slowly fall into the lock automatically. But when you try to push them in order to shut them quicker, pressure's back, it stops you from slamming it. So there I was, trying to push the door into the lock, while this guy was on his way to follow me into the house. Believe it or not, the door fell into the lock right on the second that he reached the doorstep. Through the glass door, we just looked at each other, both breathing heavily from the race. He looked quite disappointed. I quickly ran upstairs to my apartment and locked myself in it. Later that night, I looked outside my window and I saw that same man walking up and down the road in front of the house. He stayed there for maybe 3 to 4 hours after that incident. I can't tell you what it was that made me not call the cops. I guess I was like, after all, nothing happened, so what can they do about it? After that, I didn't feel safe in my home anymore because I knew that he knew where I lived. I only left my apartment when being picked up or dropped off and made sure to be home before it was turning dark every day for 2 weeks. Finally, I decided to go to the police and tell them about it to ask whether they can keep a special eye on the neighborhood for a bit. I went to the police station and it happened exactly as I feared. They took notes and said, we can't really do anything about it now. You should have called before, but we'll make a note. A couple of days pass and suddenly I get a call back from another police officer who asks me a lot about what happened. He then tells me that they've been looking for the guy on crutches for months already because he molested several girls in our town, followed them into their apartments, and even slept in front of their doors. He had been in police custody before and got out and violated probation. He had some kind of mental illness too. The police officer told me to immediately call if the guy ever shows up again. He luckily never did. It was only then that I understood the seriousness of the situation and realized that I most likely escaped an attempted assault in some sort of way by just an inch. I, in a way, really didn't believe myself that the whole thing had actually happened before the police guy called me back. This was 5 years ago, but I still think about it from time to time and it gives me the creeps. This happened to me a few weeks ago, and after telling someone the full story, I realized it was a bit creepy and I wanted to share. I also just moved a week ago and I haven't looked back. I was living just outside a major city in the Pacific Northwest, in an area known for being a bit shady. Some petty crimes, but definitely not a place to walk with headphones or be out at night. I'm a mid-20s female and I box for fun, and I've become very aware of my surroundings given the homeless issue around here. I decided to go to a bar 5 blocks up the road since it was just one of those nights. I had one too many and I started walking home around 11 p.m. on a weeknight. There was no one on the street and a few cars. When I cross the second street, I see a man start to follow me, so I keep walking and get my pepper spray out of my backpack. You never know these days. Suddenly, there's a man up next to me in a dark puffy coat saying hello and asking how I'm doing. My pace picks up and my body goes cold as I pick up my pace, and he is too, shoulder to shoulder with me. With my arms crossed, Holding my pepper spray, he keeps talking to me, brushing shoulders, saying how beautiful I am and rambling. I don't remember anything else he said due to my adrenaline and panic as I'm alone in the dark and intoxicated. I get to my street and there's about 10 stairs that go up from the street with the house I'm living in at the top of the steps and a 15-foot driveway. I start to turn to go up the stairs and the man says he wants to take me home. Me. No. Man. Please, miss. Me. With my pepper spray out and being raised, I said, no, leave me alone, stop. I see him start to reach out to me, so I turn and book it up the stairs. I hear him screaming at me. Unsure if he's following, I don't look back. I punch in the door code and I lock the door behind me. My heart racing, I stood at the door for a moment, praying he didn't see where I went and doesn't bang on the doors or yell and wake my roommates. It stays silent. I walk up to my room and lock my door, and a few tears stream down. I called an apartment manager the next day to view an apartment 8 miles away, as what's known as a much safer area, a quiet area. I took the apartment and I moved 2 weeks later. I always mentally plan to clock someone in the jaw in these kind of moments, but in that moment, all I could do was yell and run. So to the bum who wanted to make sure I got home safe, I very much made it without you, and please, let's not meet again. This story took place last night when I got off work at my second job. I work in a call center and get off work at 10 p.m. Usually there are 3 or 4 people who get off work at the same time as me, so I never really walk out to my car alone. Our office is right next to a college campus. It's not particularly a dangerous area, but there are always people milling in around outside. Last night, I had to stay late because our system wouldn't let me punch out. I had to wait for a manager to come and reset the time clock. This delayed me by about 10 or 15 minutes. When I was leaving, there was no one else around. I really didn't think anything of it, as I was tired and just ready to get home. We have an employee entrance on the side of the building, though. My car was parked on the same side, but it was quite a distance from the door. I went out of the door and I started walking toward my car. And I was going through my phone, so I wasn't really paying attention. I heard someone yell something, but I didn't really register what he said. He repeated himself several times, so I looked up and saw a guy sitting in a maroon car. He was parked in the next row over, but there weren't many cars in the parking lot, so I could see him clearly. He had his window down, and he shouted again, "Hey there, girly." Just to give some perspective on this, I haven't been called girly in a while, and I'm a 30-year-old, a happily married woman, and I am a mother of 3. I also drive a minivan. I wouldn't say I'm ugly, but I usually don't pay attention to men and don't usually have men call out to me in parking lots. I wondered if he was talking to someone else, but he was making eye contact with me. At this point, I found the whole thing amusing and just wrote him off. But he kept saying stuff, so I sped up and got to my van. I got inside and locked the doors. At this point, the guy had pulled out of his spot and drove off. I thought he must have lost interest, so I just backed out and started to leave the parking lot. I pulled around the corner of the building and there was his car. He was idling in front of the main entrance. I thought he might have been picking someone up, but when I left the lot, he followed behind me. At first I tried to tell myself that he was just trying to go home, but I started to notice that he would follow me from lane to lane. Every turn that I made, he would follow. At this point, I started to panic. I told myself that I was using the main road and it could just be that he lived in the same direction. On my way home, I have to take this 2-lane road that is usually deserted at night. When he followed me on this road, I started to get really worried, so I called my husband. He told me to turn into our friend's subdivision and see if he followed me. I turned in, and so did he. At this point, I was freaking out. My husband told me not to come home. He was putting the kids in the car and he would meet me at a gas station that was halfway between our house and where I was at. I turned around in a cul-de-sac. He followed me around it and back out to the deserted road. I was hysterically crying at this point as he was following really closely and I was afraid he would try to run me off the road. The guy kept flashing his lights and moving into the other lane. He never tried to pass me or even get up even with me. I don't know what game he was playing. My husband was on the phone with me trying to keep me calm though. I finally reached the gas station and pulled in next to our other car. This guy pulls in and pulls up behind mine, blocking me into the spot. At this point, my husband jumps out of our car and starts walking towards him. My husband is not necessarily a tough guy, but he can be intimidating. The guy peels out and takes off, going the opposite direction. I don't know what he was planning, but it definitely scared me. I let my manager know that it happened, and they are going to have the building security keep an eye out for him. As for me, I will not be walking out alone again. If I ever have to stay late, I was told that security can walk me to my car. This was definitely the scariest thing that has happened to me in a long time. This was about 10 years ago, but I remember it clearly. At the time, I was working swing shifts, so I would get off of work at 12 a.m. and had to wait 30 minutes for a bus, which took an additional 30 minutes to get to the stop closest to my house, which was a little under a mile away. I rode this bus every night, and it was usually fairly empty aside from myself and a few other people getting off retail jobs who I'd see pretty often. This happened during the holidays, so stores were open super late, and the closing employees rode my bus. But I was at the last stop on the line, and I was usually the last person on the bus. This night, the same people as always got on the bus and got off at their regular stops. The second to the last stop, I noticed that another guy was still on the bus. Another guy I had never seen before, and I saw that he was watching me. I was 18 years old at the time, dressed in sort of junky clothes. I worked at a homeless shelter, so I never dressed up nice or anything. But still, occasionally drew the attention of creeps on the bus just because I was a girl alone late at night. Whatever though, I thought to myself. I'd usually just tell creepy guys to screw off, and at the very worst, they'd be like, "You're a bitch" or something, and that was the end of that. By 18, I dealt with it plenty of times, so I wasn't necessarily upset by this, but this creepy guy was sort of different. Not that it matters, but to give you a picture, he was an overweight Middle Eastern guy dressed in a knit sweater, slacks and wireframe glasses. Didn't say a word the entire time we were on the bus, just glared, never breaking his gaze, just transfixed on me. Finally, we got to my stop, the last stop, and he was still sitting in the back of the bus, watching me as I got off. I think the bus driver got off and realized that the dude was still on the bus. I started walking up the hill to my house like I always do, and I noticed that the bus was still sitting at the stop, instead of pulling out and putting on its 2 terminal sign like it normally did. Weird, sure, but I kept walking. I'd made it about 500 feet, and I heard the bus pull out and drive off. Then I heard someone running up behind me. Without even looking back, I knew it was the guy from the bus. He was no more than 50 feet behind me at this point, and I could hear him heaving to catch his breath, and he yelled out, "Princess, please wait." And of course, I didn't wait, I just kept going. But he didn't stop. He kept yelling, "Please, please, princess, I want to make love to you. I have money. Please, I will pay you." I didn't stop walking, and I didn't want to make eye contact or acknowledge him, but I'm also walking down a dark street with no cars and no people, and he is hot on my trail, but can't keep up with me and seems pretty winded. By the time I made it down the block, he was yelling at the top of his lungs. The same thing over and over. "Princess, princess, please, let me make love to you. I will pay you. Just stop, please." And he started sobbing, absolutely wailing, all while that he wanted to make love to me and would pay me for it. He wouldn't stop crying, and he was so loud I'm surprised he didn't wake anyone in the neighborhood up. At this point, he's still far behind and crying. I was 5 blocks from my house, and I did not want to let the guy know where I lived, so I decided to call the police. He kept loudly crying and sobbing and pleading me. I let the dispatcher know that some guy was following me and propositioning me and crying. She could hear him sobbing in the background and said that a deputy would be there soon. I live in a really small strip in an unincorporated part of the county, between 2 cities with their own police departments, so the response times weren't bad. And I yelled at the guy, "Hey, I just called the cops, so leave me alone." And he just stopped, standing there. I keep walking, but slowly, since I'm so close to my house. A couple minutes pass and there's lights. A sheriff was coming down the street when I turned around. The guy was nowhere to be found. The officer asked if I wanted him to go look for him or if I just wanted a ride home. I didn't want to deal with that guy again, so I accepted the ride and asked him to just check around the area around my house after he dropped me off. Since it's pretty unusual to see an overweight Middle Eastern guy in a sweater and slacks wandering around crying at 1:30 a.m. on a weeknight in a residential area. I have no idea if they found him, no idea what would happen if they did find him, since I'm not sure if anything he did was actually illegal or just creepy as hell. Needless to say, I deadbolted my house and stayed up all night talking to a friend in a different time zone until it was morning. I used to be a surveillance investigator for insurance claims, work injury stuff, to see if people who claimed to have been hurt at work and were collecting free money were not actually injured. I did this full time for about 10 years. Doing a new case every few days for 10 years, you see a lot of weird shit. For example, one time I saw drug dealers in a downtown city literally riding horseback. You see scary stuff too, obviously if you're in a bad neighborhood, etc. The scariest encounter went down about 20 years ago. This was a case in a somewhat rural area, which were always the toughest. You get there at 6 a.m. to see what cars are in the vicinity and run plates to see if they match the person. Then mostly, you watch for the registered vehicle to depart if you found one. This place had one car in the driveway with no plates, which actually was quite unusual. You were also provided an age, weight, and height of the person and, in rare cases, a picture. So I knew this guy was in his mid-30s, average height and weight. First day, it turned out that he left before I got there. Protocol is if you can't confirm they are home by 10 a.m., 4 hours on site, you literally need to knock on their door to confirm if they are home. You usually pretend to be a UPS delivery, in a costume and a dollar store item in an envelope with a clipboard. Surprisingly, that works. Anyways, no one was home. On the second day, I came back at 5 a.m., and lo and behold, a second vehicle was there, also with no plates. The dude came out around 5:30 and left. I followed him, but he was immediately wise and knew he was being followed, which usually means they're up to no good. Like working while collecting insurance disability money, aka insurance fraud. I let him go for a while, trying to be discreet about it. I came back the third day in another car, which you also sometimes had to do. This time he left again early, and I successfully followed him to a farm in the neighboring rural hills. In short, I busted his ass on video doing heavy-duty farm work for several hours. He eventually caught on and realized he was being watched. I took off from my parked position and thought there was no way he could suddenly get off of his tractor, run to his truck, and get to me as there were driveways etc. between us and also a creek. Somehow he was suddenly on my ass in his truck, and we were on scary rural-ass mountain roads. I was scared shitless and I kept driving, but somehow I made it to the freeway. I had literally been lost in the mountains. On the freeway, he followed me for miles and I couldn't shake him. He would pull beside me at times and flex his arm and gesture to pull over. This dude was actually pretty scary looking, and I had evidence on him that would cost him in more ways than one. I literally called 911 and reported a drunk driver endangering me, but was surprisingly told the officers were in between shifts and couldn't help. There was an easy pass bridge about 20 miles up if I got that far, and at first I thought I could lose him there if he didn't have the easy pass, but then realized again he had no plates, so it wouldn't matter. Anyways, after many miles, I finally was able to shake him, but he remained pretty close behind. I exited the freeway and found a gas station. A cop was there, and I reported this guy and his truck. The cop made a call and I didn't see this guy pull up. Shortly thereafter, I gassed up my car and left, and drove home and even submitted my report. I'm sure his free insurance money ended at the very least. The scariest part is that I actually worried this guy had my license plate and could run it somehow, as I was able to do for work and locate where I live. I began to research him online. Sometimes in that line of work, you learn the potential insurance fraud of the person you are following is the least of their criminal endeavors. Well, I learned this guy was a hardcore convicted felon who had been in federal prisons and was even a gang member and hard drug user and dealer. I was scared, but nothing happened over the next few years, and I eventually forgot about it. But about 5 years later or so, I had a case in the same area again and thought about this guy. I wanted to Google him to see what the police revealed about him in the last few years. I Googled him again and discovered that he was actually dead. I learned that a couple of years prior, he had taken his girlfriend hostage with a gun and killed someone who tried to help her, then was killed himself by another person who actually saved her. So I don't need to worry about meeting him again.